A new world gave him a task with a 99 chance of failure. But the rules were horribly familiar. Unachievable goals on zero budget, and a deadline that would kill him. This wasn't a realm for heroes. It was a job for a manager, and he was ready to deliver. He knew the corporate secret for making any miracle happen on demand. You just work your entire team to the brink of death and beyond. But this tale has no savior. Just a man who was broken first. Our story starts as the day begins like any other for countless commuters, with the train rattling across a bridge while the sun rises over the city. Inside the packed train, a weary salaryman named Oh Hyunmin endures the suffocating crush of the morning rush hour. Utterly drained, he feels like he's at his breaking point, muttering to himself that he's dying from exhaustion. Just then, the automated announcement declares the train is arriving at Yoido Station, the heart of Seoul's financial district. As passengers shove their way off the train, he gets caught in the chaotic tide of people. He clicks his tongue in annoyance at the lack of courtesy from the younger people pushing past him. But then, in a moment of sheer luck, he spots the impossible, an empty seat on the notoriously crowded Line 9 during rush hour. Sinking into the seat with a sigh of relief, he closes his eyes, savoring the small moment of happiness. This is manager Oh Hyunmin, a 33-year-old corporate warrior. His life has been a string of successes, top of his class, passing the CPA exam while still in school, and joining a major corporation as the top recruit. From there, he quickly became the youngest manager in company history and was on a fast track to becoming its youngest executive. Whenever a project hit a dead end, his executives always had the same solution. Their go-to answer for any impossible task was always, give it to Oh Hyunmin. So he earned a reputation as the man who could achieve the impossible, the one who gets results, even if it kills him. Back on the train, Hyunmin sighs, the weight of that reputation and the exhaustion it brings evident on his face. Even for a miracle worker like him, 3 straight months of overtime was proving to be too much. And so, the overwhelming fatigue finally takes over, and he drifts off to sleep on his commute. After some time, he jolts awake in a panic, suddenly realizing that he must have dozed off. Looking up at a strange, cloudy sky, he's filled with the dreadful thought that he's missed his stop. But his confusion deepens when he finds himself not at a train station, but in a desolate, rocky canyon. In the blink of an eye, he's suddenly seated on a crude but imposing throne made of sharp crystals. Below him, a massive crowd of goblins erupts into a deafening, celebratory roar. The horde of green-skinned creatures cheers wildly, celebrating his sudden appearance. Some are so overcome with emotion that they're weeping with joy at the sight of him. Hyunmin rubs his eyes, convinced he must be dreaming or just hallucinating from overwork. His face contorts in pure bewilderment as he tries to process the bizarre scene unfolding before him. The goblins' excited screams of "Gaia" echo through the cavern. One of them is so ecstatic that it even starts breakdancing, swept up in the celebratory frenzy. Completely dumbfounded, he can only manage a weak, breathy "ah." Clutching his head, he concludes that the 3rd month of overtime has finally taken its toll on his sanity. He can only surmise that he's either died from overwork or has completely lost his mind. All the while, the goblin horde continues to cheer for him from the cavern floor. They prostrate themselves before his throne, worshipping him as some kind of savior. Hyunmin just stares blankly, still struggling to comprehend that any of this is actually happening. As he takes in their features, the green skin and long pointed ears, he comes to an undeniable conclusion, and confirms to himself that, no matter how he looks at them, these creatures are definitely goblins. They look just like the low-level monsters from games or anime. However, he quickly notices something incredibly strange about them. The goblins cry out in unison, hailing the arrival of their long-awaited lord. Hyunmin is stunned to realize the goblins aren't just making noise, they're speaking fluent Korean. Confused by their reverence, he wonders if they could possibly be talking about him. But his train of thought is interrupted as a single tiny goblin bravely toddles toward the throne. The small, cute goblin looks up with sparkling eyes and offers him a strange fruit, pleading, "My lord, eat." Completely baffled, he hesitantly takes the fruit from the small creature. He examines the offering, noting that he's never seen a fruit like this before. As he holds it, he feels an unsettling pulse from within, as if it's alive. Meanwhile, all the goblins, big and small, gaze at him with wide, hopeful, sparkling eyes. Pressured by their expectant stares, he figures he'll look like a villain if he refuses their offering. Besides, his stomach rumbles loudly, reminding him just how hungry he is. He then wistfully recalls that his last meal was just a cheap convenience store kimbap triangle. Deciding to throw caution to the wind, he resigns himself to his fate and takes a large bite of the strange fruit. The moment the flavor hits his tongue, his eyes fly open in utter shock. The goblins watch with bated breath, their expressions a mix of awe and anticipation. Despite his initial reluctance, Hyunmin is forced to admit it's the most delicious fruit he's ever tasted. Hearing their lord's approval, the goblins erupt into another wave of ecstatic cheers. Hyunmin is baffled by their over-the-top reaction, remarking that he only took one bite, but his enjoyment is cut short as a sudden sharp jolt courses through his body. He collapses to his knees, much to the concern of the small goblin beside him. Overcome with dizziness, he immediately suspects that eating the fruit was a terrible mistake. Suddenly, a holographic status window flickers into existence right in front of his face. He stares at the strange blue shard of light, a digital interface in this primitive-looking world. His mind races to find a logical explanation, wondering if it's some kind of advanced hologram. He reads the screen, which identifies him as Lord Ohunyan of the Red Rock Valley, with traits including overtime and speech. His eyes then fix on a terrifying line in red, a territory war countdown that is rapidly ticking down. Dazed, he asks the empty air what a territory war even is. To his shock, a system message pops up, seemingly preparing to answer his spoken question. The system defines it as a total war to protect his territory and subjects, prompting him to ask who is talking. As the pieces start to click into place, a look of dawning horror spreads across his face. He realizes the wiki tool listed on his status screen must be the intelligence answering his questions. Impatiently, he cuts off the wiki's offer to explain the history of territory wars, demanding more practical information instead. Panicked, he asks the system to explain where he is and how he ended up here when he was just on the subway. The wiki promptly informs him that he has been summoned to the demon realm. However, it adds that it cannot provide his exact location because his territory level is too low. Hyunmin is aghast, unable to believe he's been transported not to a heroic fantasy world, but to the demon realm. He sits in stunned silence, trying to absorb the sheer insanity of his new reality. Soon, his frustration boils over and he yells at the system, demanding a more detailed briefing than the cryptic answers he's receiving. The wiki, however, coolly repeats that it is unable to answer because his territory level is too low. Losing his temper, he demands to know the one thing that truly matters, how he can get back to his own world. Yet he's met with the same infuriating bureaucratic response: his access level is too low. Defeated by the unhelpful system, he is left speechless and demoralized. He then pinches his cheek hard, and the sharp pain confirms his worst fear: this is definitely not a dream. The full, crushing weight of his impossible situation finally hits him, and he grabs his head in despair. But after a moment of panic, his corporate training kicks in. He forces himself to calm down and assess the situation. He grimly summarizes the mission objective presented to him: he's been brought here to fight a war. When the wiki confirms his assessment is correct, he massages his temples, the stress already all too familiar. He then asks about his manpower, turning to look at the army of goblins who are his new subjects. Getting a closer look at one of them, his assessment is not favorable. He grimly notes that his entire army looks weak and malnourished, muttering that the situation is insane. He laments that, forget fighting a war, these pathetic creatures look like they would lose a fight even against him. In desperation, he asks the wiki how he's supposed to win with this army and, more importantly, what happens if he loses. The wiki delivers a chilling response: if he loses, there is a very high probability that he will die. It clarifies that upon defeat, the enemy lord gains authority over his life, and statistically, 99.95 of defeated lords have been killed. Staring into the abyss of those odds, Hyunmin can only let out a hollow laugh of despair. Faced with near-certain death, he sums up his feelings with a single, perfectly chosen curse word. He bitterly observes that this new world is just as much of a screwed-up mess as the reality he left behind. He flashes back to his life as a manager, constantly dealing with impossible projects with no budget and no manpower. He recalls the crushing pressure of having no time, yet still being expected to deliver reports by the next morning. His old life was a never-ending cycle of stress, exhaustion, and impossible demands. He comes to a startling realization: even the part where he has to work with his life on the line is exactly the same as the corporate reality he's always known. His demeanor shifts instantly, the panic is gone, replaced by the cool composure of a seasoned manager as he addresses the wiki with one last question. He needs to confirm if there's a way out. If he keeps winning and his territory level increases, can he return home? With his entire fate riding on this single question, he asks the wiki plainly if it is possible. A flicker of hope ignites as the wiki gives him a one-word answer: possible. But as the system begins to recite the abysmal survival rates for new lords, he cuts it off, deciding he's heard all he needs to. Stepping down from his throne, he internalizes the core problem. According to the system, he's set to die in 4 days. He then resolutely walks toward his new employees in this bizarre, unknown world, and acknowledges that he knows nothing about this war. but he knows his assets, one cute goblin and a mob of pathetic ones. He looks out at the sea of weak, malnourished goblins who are supposed to be his army. A familiar, ruthless determination begins to form in his mind. Facing his new subordinates, he notes that no matter how bleak things look, he still has 4 whole days to work with. The corporate killer instinct awakens as he reminds himself of who he is. Oh Hyunmin, the youngest manager destined for the top, and addresses his goblin workforce, making a firm declaration, "I have no intention of dying here." A sinister managerial smile spreads across his face as he prepares to implement his core business philosophy. Overtime creates miracles. With the chilling authority of a boss announcing a crunch period, he gets the attention of his new team, and then he delivers his first official order as their lord. Starting tonight, everyone is on overtime. Hyunmin analyzes their strategic position, noting how the narrow entrance creates a natural bottleneck. He then quizzes his clueless troops on battle strategy, only to be met with confused silence and a resounding, "No idea." And when the system declares his territory level too low to provide tactical advice, he curtly tells it to shut up. Exasperated by his army's incompetence, the new lord realizes he'll have to teach them survival from the absolute basics. Getting their attention, he prepares to lay out the first phase of his master plan, and dramatically announces their primary objective, to defend the narrow passage with their very lives. Rolling up his sleeves, he gets down to business, asking his troops what must be done to prepare for their defense. Without waiting for an answer, he immediately begins delegating, barking orders at the first group of 10 goblins. Their first task is to venture out and cut down trees roughly his size. The goblins, utterly bewildered by the command, can only stare and point at each other in confusion. Losing his patience, Hyunmin bellows at the stunned goblins to get a move on. Startled into action, they finally scramble off to begin their logging task. He dryly notes that his new troops are just like military privates, only responding when shouted at. Next, he designates a group of 15 goblins for a grueling assignment. He orders them to scale the nearby cliff and gather every single stone they can find to create a rockfall trap. Without question this time, they begin their arduous climb up the steep cliff face. The remaining troops are then assigned to work with him, tasked with digging pits near the entrance. With no shovels available, he tells them they will have to dig with their bare hands. Leading by example, Hyunmin tears into the earth himself, declaring that if they lack teeth, they'll just have to bite with their gums. As 2 moons rise in the night sky, their forced labor continues unabated. Their hard work pays off, resulting in a stockpile of rocks and a barricade of sharpened logs. The ground before the entrance is now a treacherous field of hidden pits, ready to ensnare the approaching enemy. Our guy addresses his exhausted goblin workforce, commending them for a job well done. He takes in their sorry state covered in dust, with broken nails and scraped knees from the intense manual labor. Just then, a system notification reveals his unique trait. Overtime has activated, increasing efficiency while reducing fatigue and hunger for his troops. Granting them a momentary rest, he gathers the goblins for a pre-battle briefing. But he informs them that despite their day's work, they are far from ready, as the real work is only just beginning. In true corporate manager fashion, he poses a question. Do you know what the essence of overtime is? He then lectures the exhausted goblins that overtime is about getting ahead while the enemy sleeps. Trying to inspire them, he proclaims that every drop of sweat they shed now will spare a drop of blood in the coming war. He demands they rally their spirits and give him a powerful shout. However, the goblins hesitate when he orders them to shout for 3 seconds straight. Finally finding their voice, the troops begin to chant overtime with surprising fervor. Pleased with their morale boost, he commands everyone to grab their weapons and assemble for battle training. The assembly is pure chaos as they scramble frantically to arm themselves. He looks on with dismay, muttering about what a complete mess his army is. He then assesses their pitiful arsenal, and even bare hands, much to his disbelief. This is their entire fighting force. Rocks, rusty daggers. Deciding to take a more strategic approach, he reasons that since the enemy are also goblins, their gear can't be much better. He visualizes the battle like a game of chess, assuming that individual combat abilities will be roughly equal on both sides. Therefore, he concludes, the deciding factor won't be the quality of their weapons, but how they are used. Hyunmin then recalls a respected business leader's advice. All the answers are in the art of war. Drawing on his past studies of military texts for business, he identifies the classic infantry solution, the phalanx formation. The strategy is decided, they will use the phalanx formation. Believing even a clumsy imitation will give them an edge, he orders the goblins to form a straight line, but they don't understand. Faced with their utter lack of military knowledge, he realizes he must teach them basic rows and columns from scratch. So he designates the small, cute goblin with the red bandana as the reference point to build the formation around. With a hands-on approach, Hyunmin begins physically arranging the goblins one by one. He continues to manually position his troops, forming the foundation of their battle line, and instructs them on proper spacing, telling them to line up so they can feel their neighbor's elbow, and at last, they begin to resemble a unit. He then demonstrates the proper spear grip for a forward thrust. He lays down the simple commands for the drill, advance on his signal, and thrust on his signal. Their first attempt at advancing is an immediate failure, as one goblin trips over its own feet. Hyunmin coldly tells the whimpering goblin on the ground to get up. With no room for error, he sternly orders them to fix the line and prepare to go again. The goblins reset their formation, however clumsily, as he barks the advance command once more. Recalling a lesson from his old life that repetition beats talent, Hyunmin resolves to drill them until they get it right. At first, the training is a mess of tangled limbs and fumbling spears as he forces them to repeat the advance. Throughout the night, his voice echoes through the canyon, relentlessly pushing them to train again and again. As the grueling drill continues, he notices their expressions have begun to change. Their hands tremble and their shoulders slump as the physical and mental exhaustion finally sets in. He recognizes their look of utter defeat, comparing it to a new employee after having a report rejected for the third time. Yet, seeing their pain, he reminds himself that stopping is not an option. If they give up now, it's all over. With renewed determination, he promises them they will survive and forces them to continue the drill. The word again becomes a brutal mantra, echoing as they are forced through endless repetitions. As the sun begins to rise, the relentless training shows no sign of stopping. Their feet are battered and twisted from the non-stop marching and stumbling. Hyunmin berates a faltering goblin, demanding to know if he came to the demon realm just to play around. To crush any remaining hope, he institutes a new rule. Every mistake now means 10 more repetitions, eliciting a cry of despair from the troops. But suddenly, his intense drill is interrupted by a small voice calling out to him. The little red bandana goblin toddles towards him, breaking away from the exhausted group. The Lord stops and gives the small creature his full, weary attention. With tears in his eyes, the little goblin makes a shocking request to just be sent to the enemy as food. Hyunmin is left speechless, completely stunned by the goblin's willingness to be sacrificed. The goblin explains that it's their tribe's old way. By sacrificing 3 young ones, the rest could avoid fighting and survive. He sweetly explains that if he is sacrificed, then his lord can live. In an act of pure, tragic innocence, the little goblin smiles, happy to give his life for his leader. The rest of the goblin troops, having heard the exchange, stand with their spirits completely shattered. Hyunmin's face darkens as he processes the tribe's horrifying survival strategy. He grits his teeth, barely containing his disgust and disbelief at their cowardly tradition. He then turns to his broken army and challenges them, asking if they are truly happy with a survival bought by sacrificing their own children. The goblins can only look down in shame, unable to answer. Drawing on a harsh life lesson, he warns them that if you keep giving things up, eventually nothing will remain. After that, he roars with newfound purpose, declaring that they will fight with everything they have. His words finally ignite a fire in the goblins, who now vow not to give up a single inch of land or a single child. Hyunmin delivers the final, rousing line of his speech, screaming that they will never let anything be taken from them again. As if on cue, the territory war countdown hits 0, and the system announces the start of the battle. As if on cue, the territory war countdown hits 0, and the system announces the start of the battle. The ground cracks open as the enemy makes a dramatic entrance onto the battlefield. The foot of an enemy goblin stomps down on their territory, signaling the invasion's start. A savage horde of Black Hill goblins swarms into view, their eyes glowing with malice. At the choke point, Hyunmin and his small, organized phalanx stand firm, ready for the onslaught. With grim determination etched on his face, he issues his first combat command, raise spears. Their spirits reforged, the goblin troops raise their weapons in a unified, disciplined line. They stare down the dark passage as the glowing eyes of the charging enemy horde get closer and closer. Hyunmin stands confidently with his troops, believing they have made every possible preparation for this moment. In contrast, the enemy Black Hill goblins charge forward, a disorganized and frenzied mob. With a predatory grin, he welcomes the fight, coolly inviting them to come at us. The battleground is set, a narrow canyon lined with boulders, concealing a deep pit trap for the unsuspecting enemy. Hyunmin and his newly formed goblin phalanx stand firm, bracing for the imminent charge of the Black Hill goblins. And with a ferocious screech, the enemy horde emerges from the darkness, beginning their reckless charge. His goblins flinch, their resolve tested by the terrifying sight of the onrushing enemy. But their lord's voice cuts through the fear, commanding them to focus and hold their ground until the enemy falls into the pit. Hyunmin watches intently, muttering for the enemy to come just a little closer to spring his trap. The lead Black Hill goblins halt in confusion as they see the pit in front of them. Panic erupts as the goblins in the front scream warnings, but the momentum of the charge from behind is too great. Chaos ensues as the mindless charge causes the enemy to trample one another in a desperate attempt to stop. The enemy ranks descend into a self-destructive mob, yelling and shoving each other into the pit. Watching the mayhem, Hyunmin smirks with satisfaction, realizing the enemy is just as pathetic and disorganized as his tribe once was. With a predatory gleam in his eyes, he confidently declares that today's victory is now theirs. Meanwhile, the goblins at the bottom of the pit are in a panicked frenzy, turning on each other in the confined space. He coolly watches the chaos unfold, encouraging them to squirm as they inch closer to his forces. The enemy goblins climb on top of one another to cross the pit. In the process, they stomp on the Black Hill goblins beneath them. Some of them cross the pit and renew their frenzied charge forward. Hyunmin calculates that with over half the enemy now across the pit's threshold, their retreat will soon be impossible. More goblins pour over the edge, their bodies beginning to form a gruesome bridge over the pit. Gritting his teeth, he vows that he will make the invaders regret ever setting foot in his territory. He stands ready, his hand raised, waiting for the perfect moment to initiate the second phase of his plan. As the maximum number of enemies enter the kill zone, Hyunmin screams the order, now. He commands the goblins stationed on the cliffs above to begin pelting the enemy with rocks, and not to stop, raining them down relentlessly. With all their might, they push massive boulders over the cliff edges, starting a deadly rock slide. The first boulder finds its mark, crushing an enemy goblin's skull with a sickening impact. Then a devastating barrage of rocks of all sizes begins to pour down into the narrow canyon. The rock slide smashes into the trapped goblins, crushing them indiscriminately under an avalanche of stone. A lone survivor stumbles amidst the carnage, disoriented by the sudden, overwhelming attack. Just then, he turns and sees that some of his other comrades have passed the pit. As they reach him, they push him to move forward. So, as he moves forward, he is also crushed by the boulder. Hyunmin watches his perfect trap unfold, noting the enemy are now nothing more than sitting targets. A wounded Black Hill goblin struggles to rise, the battle already lost around him. The last few desperate survivors make a final, hopeless charge toward Hyunmin's phalanx. Our guy grins, confidently telling his troops that the enemy's numbers no longer mean anything, and issues his next command, ordering his disciplined phalanx to raise their spears and prepare to advance. With a mighty roar, he leads the charge himself, yelling for his goblins to advance. The spear wall meets the ragged survivors, easily dispatching the disorganized and terrified enemy. A young goblin trembles, shocked after making his first kill in the heat of battle. Hyunmin quickly snaps the soldier back to attention, ordering him to focus, pull back his spear, and stab again. Following their lord's commands, the goblins systematically and efficiently eliminate the remaining stragglers. He directs the battle like a corporate project, yelling for his troops to keep formation and run the enemy through. The goblin phalanx advances methodically, their bloodied spears a testament to their newfound discipline. Following his orders, his forces stab and kill, leaving no enemy standing in their path. The advance continues relentlessly, pushing the enemy back over the bodies of their fallen comrades. As the enemies push back, they fall into the pit they had already crossed. Now they are fully trapped. If they move back, they will be crushed by the boulders falling from above, and if they move forward, they will be killed by the spears of our guy's goblins. Our guy smirks, satisfied that everything is unfolding exactly according to his master plan. He rallies his troops, explaining how they've seized the momentum with a pincer attack of boulders from above and spears from the front. His goblins finally understand that the hard labor they endured building the traps has turned the tide of the battle. However, their celebration is cut short as Hyunmin senses that the battle is not yet over. His confident expression turns to one of concern as an unexpectedly powerful presence makes itself known. A massive, muscular figure steps out from the carnage and looks toward his force, which is now trapped. With glowing eyes and a thunderous roar, he unleashes his intimidating aura. He crouches, his powerful muscles coiling as he prepares to attack. He then leaps through the air with terrifying speed, closing the distance in an instant. Landing before the phalanx, the Hobgoblin Lord towers over both Hyunmin and his goblin soldiers. He then looks down on Hyunmin with contempt, calling him unimpressive. Hyunmin retorts with a snarky comment about the Hobgoblin's breath, while internally identifying that the creature is the lord of the opposing goblins. Enraged by the quip, the Hobgoblin Lord dismisses it as nonsense and prepares to fight. He bellows for the small fry to stay out of it, challenging Hyunmin to a duel between lords. Our guy feigns shock and confusion at the sudden challenge for a one-on-one fight. Playing the part of a coward, he points between them, nervously confirming the duel. Seeing his reaction, the Hobgoblin Lord grins maliciously, believing his opponent is afraid. Hyunmin puts on a convincing performance, trembling with fake fear to lull his opponent into a false sense of security. The Hobgoblin Lord raises his massive bone club, ready to crush the supposedly terrified human, and mocks Hyunmin in front of his troops, declaring their new lord to be a pathetic wretch. Disappointed by the lack of a real challenge, the Hobgoblin wonders if he was expecting too much. Promising a quick end, he tells Hyunmin to stop acting tough and accept his fate. Just as the Hobgoblin's club descends, a large rock smashes squarely against his head, interrupting the attack. Stunned and furious, the Hobgoblin Lord roars, demanding to know who dared to interfere with their sacred duel. He looks up in disbelief to see a sky full of boulders raining down directly upon him, and with no time to react, he is pummeled and buried under an overwhelming avalanche of heavy stones. In a brutal display, the enemy lord is crushed and utterly annihilated by the rockslide ambush. Standing over the Hobgoblin's rocky grave, Hyunmin calmly states that in war, winning is all that matters. He smirks, explaining that since the battle is already won, there is no point in him fighting the Hobgoblin himself. A system window appears, officially declaring his victory in the territory war. Hyunmin allows himself a small, smug smile, having perfectly executed his plan from start to finish. Raising his spear in triumph, he announces to his tribe that they did great and have won the war. For the first time, the goblins erupt in a unified, joyous cheer, celebrating their hard-earned victory. Amidst the celebration and carnage, a lone, wounded Black Hill goblin stirs, having survived the onslaught. Spotting the survivor, one of Hyunmin's goblins eagerly rallies the others to kill their hated enemy. But just as they move in for the kill, Hyunmin gives a firm, unequivocal order to hold on and stop. Confused by the command, the bloodthirsty goblins halt their attack on the survivor. The entire goblin tribe looks on in bewilderment, unable to comprehend their lord's actions. Hyunmin calmly addresses his troops, asking them why they were so intent on killing the lone goblin. One of them explains their reasoning. The Black Hill tribe has always tormented them, and if left alive, he will surely return for revenge. Our guy puts his foot down with a resounding no, rejecting their emotional reasoning. He begins his lesson, stating that if they kill the goblin, he becomes nothing more than a corpse. Hyunmin then delivers his first ruthless lesson in corporate efficiency: keep him alive, and he's a resource. Following his victory, Hyunmin surveys the spoils of war, a meager pile of resources and a massive new population of goblin prisoners. Like a manager conducting a post-mortem, he decides to go over exactly what they gained from the recent battle. The system alerts him that his territory has leveled up, absorbing 213 enemy goblins and bringing his total population to a daunting 260. The acquired resources are paltry, consisting of some dried meat, old leather, and a pile of mysterious, unknown fruit. While he has gained a new dense infantry trait, he is disturbed to learn his territory is on the 12th floor of the underground demon realm. He grimly assesses the situation, noting that their spoils amount to little more than some food and over 200 new mouths to feed. As a natural-born numbers guy, he paces anxiously, already calculating the impending logistical nightmare of feeding his new subjects. His mental forecast is grim. If the current situation continues, everyone is going to starve to death. Facing a massive food deficit, he considers the obvious solution: they need to start farming. However, the system unhelpfully informs him that ordinary agriculture is impossible on the 12th floor. Just as he is about to lose hope, his attention is drawn to the plundered fruit from the enemy's supplies. Holding up one of the odd-looking fruits, he wonders what it is and where it could have come from. He confronts the prisoners, demanding to know the origin of the fruit, since farming is impossible here. The captured goblins tremble in fear, too terrified to speak. Applying some corporate-style motivation, he offers to exclude anyone who talks from the torture list. The threat works wonders as the prisoners all start shouting at once, confessing that someone snuck into a forest at night to pick the fruit from a large tree. Annoyed by the cacophony, he yells at them to pipe down. With the crucial information in hand, he turns his attention to his own goblins. He points into the crowd and orders 3 specific goblins to step forward for an assignment. The 3 chosen goblins obediently present themselves, awaiting their lord's command. He dispatches them as a scouting party with orders to check out the mysterious forest before daybreak. Hearing the mention of the forest, the captured goblins begin to murmur nervously among themselves. Noticing their terrified reaction, he asks the prisoners what is wrong. Losing his patience, he presses a prisoner for information about what is guarding the fruit in the forest. The terrified goblin admits he has never seen it, confessing that anyone who does never comes back. Dismissing the ominous warning, he takes a bite of the fruit, stating that they still need to check it out regardless. The goblin who spoke up timidly asks for confirmation that he will not be tortured now. His own goblins, however, are clamoring for revenge, shouting that the prisoners are the enemy and should be killed. But he silences his tribe's calls for blood with a single command. He then begins a lecture, asking his troops why they believe they won the war. He dismisses their simple answers, questioning if it was because they fought well or had a good strategy. Bluntly, he tells them their victory was pure luck and that they must prepare thoroughly for the next battle, as there is no guarantee they will be lucky again. He then reveals his threat of torture was just a bluff, stating they have more important work to do than waste time on such things. Holding the fruit in his fist for emphasis, he declares that diligent preparation is the only true way to survive, and rallies his goblins with a final command: "If you understand, then let us get to work." Later, the 3 goblin scouts venture cautiously into the dark forest, wary of any danger. One of the scouts suddenly lets out a startled yelp, breaking the silence. The leader of the scouting party quickly shushes him, reminding him of their lord's orders to be quiet. They recall their lord's strict instructions: "No matter what you see there, do not touch anything, just take a look and come back." The 3 scouts press forward, moving as stealthily as they can through the eerie woods. Suddenly, one of the goblins spots their target and points excitedly. They have found it, a large tree bearing the very same fruit they were sent to find. A greedy grin spreads across the scout's face at the sight of the potential food source. But as they get closer, they notice a strange, shimmering string dangling from the fruit-laden branches. The lead scout clamps a hand over his comrade's mouth, silencing his excited cry before it can attract attention. Looking up, the scouts are horrified to discover the entire tree is cocooned in thick, glistening webs. The lead scout's face pales as he realizes the grave danger they are in. On the ground, they find the squashed carcasses of dead insects, clear evidence of a dangerous predator nearby. One scout nervously reaches down to inspect the insect remains. His hand comes away slick with a dark, viscous fluid, confirming the insects were recently killed. Understanding the immediate threat, the lead scout frantically signals for his team to retreat, but before they can escape, a sticky web ensnares one of the goblins, lifting him effortlessly off the ground. The unfortunate scout is violently dragged up into the dark canopy, his cries cut short. His blood falls onto the face of his comrade. Screaming in terror, the lead scout urges his last remaining subordinate to run for his life. Meanwhile, back at the base, a frustrated Ohyaman struggles to get coherent information from his goblins. He attempts to build a mental map of their surroundings, asking if walking in one direction will lead them to a desert. His own goblins are just as clueless, murmuring amongst themselves about this strange concept of a desert. Finally getting confirmation about a land made of sand from one of the prisoners, he begins to piece together the geography. He sighs in exasperation, complaining that even gathering this much basic information is taking forever. Despite the difficulty, he successfully creates a rough map of the 12th floor, which reveals a path from their current location through hills, a forest, a river, and finally to a desert. Though the process was painful, he is relieved to finally have the location information he needs. Hyunmin and the tribe watch as the 2 surviving scouts run frantically back to the base. The exhausted and terrified goblins collapse at his feet. He immediately notices their party is one short and demands to know what happened and where the other scout is. With fear in their eyes, the survivors report that their comrade is gone. One scout explains with a trembling voice that their companion was dragged upward into the darkness. Hyunmin reacts with shock and frustration, reminding them that he clearly instructed them to only observe and be careful. As he admonishes the goblin, however, he notices a strange, fine thread clinging to its shoulder. Plucking the sticky string from the scout, he demands a full report of everything they saw. Hyunmin stands stoically as he listens to the 2 terrified survivors recount their ordeal. Their report paints a chilling picture: webs wrapped around trees and strange holes stamped into the ground. Holding the sticky, tough string between his fingers, he analyzes the evidence and begins to connect the dots. He comes to a horrifying conclusion. The creature guarding the fruit tree is a spider. He then assesses the risks, realizing that fighting dangerously large spiders in a dense forest would put his tribe at a massive tactical disadvantage, and understands that in the worst-case scenario, they could fail to get food and might even lose all the goblins in the process. The sheer weight of the high-risk, high-reward situation leaves him momentarily stunned. However, he reflects that his life has never been easy, and he has no other choice but to face the danger head-on. With his resolve hardened, he turns to his entire tribe and issues a startling command: "Everyone, pack up." Gazing towards the treacherous woods with grim determination, he announces their next move: "We are going to the forest." The scene shifts back to the foreboding forest, revealing the grim fate of the lost Goblin Scout. The missing scout is seen completely helpless, tightly cocooned in thick, shimmering spiderwebs. A monstrous spider descends upon its prey, sinking its fangs into the trapped goblin, and ending its life. Lord Hyunmin and his hungry goblin tribe arrive at the ominous edge of the spider-infested forest, their only hope for food. But with no clear plan, the goblins grow restless and bored while waiting for their lord's command. Meanwhile, Hyunmin stands deep in thought, calculating his next move as he observes the silent, foreboding woods. Their advance has halted at the tree line. They've reached the forest, yet the path forward remains unknown. Our guy silently notes his surprise that no spiders have emerged, expecting at least one to have shown itself by now. Stymied, he knows he needs more information on the spiders before risking a blind charge into the darkness. As their rations dwindle, the goblins' hunger begins to fray their already thin patience, and as that hunger gnaws at them, a goblin's low growl signifies the rising tension within the tribe. Finally, desperation boils over as two goblins start fighting over the last scraps of food. Hyunmin observes the infighting, knowing that simple rationing is a failing strategy and that they can't afford to just wait. Frustrated, he fiddles with a strand of spiderweb, cursing his inability to find a weakness. While he is distracted by the seemingly unbreakable web, the impulsive cute goblin sneaks past him and into the forest. Startled, Hyunmin turns to find the small goblin and immediately demands to know what he's doing, and sternly orders the nervous little goblin to get back with the others, forbidding him from acting alone. Annoyed by the lack of discipline, he shouts at the others to keep the children under control so no one else wanders off. But just as he asserts control, the sky erupts with a sudden clap of thunder and a flash of lightning. The entire tribe is caught off guard by the unexpected and terrifying thunderstorm. As the first drops of rain begin to fall, Hyunmin looks up in utter disbelief at this new complication. Reacting quickly, he orders his terrified goblins to take shelter in a nearby cave. Soaked to the bone, he laments this worst-case scenario, shocked that the demon realm even has thunderstorms. A tense silence falls over him as he processes the severity of their situation, now trapped by the storm. As the rain pours down, however, a sudden idea strikes him, causing him to pause. He glances down at the piece of spiderweb still in his hands, now soaked from the downpour, and tests the web's strength again, hoping the water has weakened it, but it remains stubbornly strong. Tossing the web aside, he confirms that, as expected, water has no effect on its durability. Once inside the cave, he sweeps his hair back and does a quick head count, asking if everyone is accounted for. He then informs the tribe that their only option is to wait inside the cave until the storm passes. Huddled together, the goblins' hunger and fear soon manifest as desperate, anxious cries. Just then, one of the older goblins timidly approaches his lord with urgent news. In a panic, the goblin reports that someone from the tribe is missing. Alarmed, Hyunmin demands to know if he's certain, his mind racing to figure out who it could be. Realizing the young ones are most vulnerable, he counts the children and asks which one has disappeared. The young goblins confirm with frightened whimpers that their friend, the cute goblin, is the one who's gone. Hyunmin looks toward the storm-ravaged forest in dismay, realizing the little runt has run off alone. He kicks the ground in frustration, shouting about the brat's foolishness and how he's trying to get himself killed. He struggles to remain calm, weighing the risks of sending a search party for the missing goblin. But he quickly dismisses the idea, concluding that the other goblins lack the judgment to navigate the forest's web-filled dangers. Meanwhile, the relentless rain continues to pour, trapping them and adding to the sense of urgency. Deciding the little goblin couldn't have gone far, he resolves to go after him himself. Without hesitation, he grabs a sharpened spear from the tribe's weapon pile. His goblins cry out in alarm as they watch their lord walk out of the safety of the cave and into the perilous storm. Pausing at the cave mouth, he gives a final, non-negotiable order for the rest of them to stay inside. As he ventures alone into the treacherous forest, he admits to himself that he'd be lying if he said he wasn't scared. Despite his fear, however, a deeper conviction drives him forward and he grips his spear, steeling his resolve, believing that willingly taking risks in a crisis is the fundamental duty of a true leader. Now on high alert, he scans the dark, wet woods for any sign of the missing goblin. His sharp eyes quickly spot a trail of small, goblin-sized footprints in the mud. Following the tracks deeper into the forest, he presses on, hoping he's on the right path. Suddenly, a massive bolt of lightning splits the sky and strikes a nearby tree with explosive force. Immediately following the strike, a terrified shriek echoes through the forest. And from the direction of the scream, the unmistakable flicker of a fire begins to illuminate the darkness. Startled by the sound and the sudden light, Hyunmin cautiously turns towards the disturbance. Wary but determined, he grips his spear and slowly makes his way toward the fire. There, he finds the cute goblin crying out for him, miraculously alive but now surrounded by the flames from the lightning strike. In a panic, the little goblin scrambles away from the blaze, not realizing his own backside is now on fire. The panicked, flaming goblin then leaps into his lord's arms for safety, while our guy yells for him to wait. He grabs the small goblin, trying to get a handle on the chaotic situation. While yelping about his burning butt, the goblin flails wildly as his lord attempts to put out the fire. While trying to calm the creature down, Hyunmin gets an ungrateful, soot-covered hand slapped across his face. Finally getting a firm grip, he smothers the flames on the goblin's loincloth by pinning him to the ground. Angrily, Hyunmin shakes the small goblin, demanding to know what he was thinking, wandering off alone. The goblin tearfully explains that he only ran off because his little brother was hungry and cried for fruit. He recalls the heartbreaking sight of his younger brother crying every day from starvation. His lord starts to scold him again, but abruptly stops as a critical realization dawns on him. His mind races as he connects the dots, thinking back on his time in this strange new world. Looking from the smoldering embers to the singed goblin, he asks himself a pivotal question: have I ever seen fire? With a newfound idea, he purposefully removes his expensive suit jacket. He then unceremoniously rips a long strip of fabric from his own clothing and fastens the cloth to the end of a spear, fashioning a makeshift torch. Meanwhile, the other goblins decide they must risk a scolding to save their lord, whom they believe to be in danger. As they prepare to leave the cave, one of them is startled by a strange sound from the forest. Though terrified of the darkness ahead, they overcome their fear, convinced they have to go and help. But their advance is cut short when they spot a mysterious, flickering light in the distance. As the light intensifies, the goblins, who have only ever known darkness, shriek in terror at the brilliant sight. Overwhelmed by the brightness, they instinctively shield their eyes from the unfamiliar blaze. Before them rages a powerful, crackling fire, a phenomenon completely alien to their experience. One goblin stares into the flames, utterly captivated and speechless. In that instant, the entire tribe is struck by a breathless, overwhelming sense of wonder. Reflected in their wide eyes is a brilliant flame burning alone in the darkness, a sight they have never before witnessed. And the one responsible for this miracle, the one holding that very flame, is their lord, Hyunmin, standing before them like a titan holding a star. To the primitive goblins, their human lord holding a torch aloft looks like a god descending upon the demon realm. Overcome with awe and relief, they cry out his name in reverence. Surprised to see them, Hyunmin asks why they disobeyed his order and left the cave. He quickly pivots, however, realizing their arrival is actually a convenient development for his new plan. He then pulls out the strand of spiderweb he saved earlier, a crucial piece of his experiment, and lowers the web into the torch's flame, where it sizzles and burns away in an instant. The goblins shriek in astonishment as they witness the indestructible web being effortlessly destroyed by fire. Just as he expected, Hyunmin confirms fire is the spider's weakness, giving credit for the discovery to the little goblin. Realizing the goblin's contribution deserves recognition, he decides to bestow upon him a proper name. He officially names the goblin Kim Prometheus, or Kimpro for short, in honor of his fiery discovery. With a rare smile, he pats the goblin's head, explaining he's named for the one who brought fire to humanity. Suddenly, a system window appears, announcing that he has bestowed a name upon a resident for the first time. The powerful, effective naming is activated, and pillars of golden light erupt around the newly christened Kim Prometheus. Kimpro stares in shock, his eyes wide as he's enveloped by a powerful, transformative energy. He begins to float into the air, levitating in a brilliant, divine aura as he undergoes a mysterious evolution. A shocked Hyunmin can only stare and utter his new name, Kimpro, as the goblin defies gravity. After a moment, Kim Prometheus gently floats back to the ground, the aura of power still clinging to him. Standing on his own 2 feet, the newly evolved goblin speaks for the first time, confidently stating his own name. Hyunmin watches with intense curiosity, wondering exactly what abilities have awakened within his subordinate. The entire tribe then erupts into a roaring chant, celebrating their new hero, Kimpro. A spark of brilliance flashes in Hyunmin's eyes as he fully grasps the potential of this new development. Seizing the moment, he silences the cheering crowd, declaring that now is not the time to get excited, but to prepare. He orders everyone to gather around and receive a torch, preparing them for the impending battle. With a vicious grin illuminated by firelight, he rallies his torch-wielding army and declares, "Now it's our turn." Hyunmin leads his torch-wielding goblin tribe into the dark and rainy forest. With a determined gaze, he halts his troops as they arrive at their destination. The goblin army has reached the spider's nest, a haunting clearing shrouded in thick webbing. A quick test with a torch confirms his suspicion that the spider silk is highly flammable. The terrifying sight of the web-filled forest sends a shiver of fear through one of the young goblins. Hyunmin grimly identifies the web-wrapped cocoons, realizing they are the remains of those who were captured. Just then, a giant spider emerges from the darkness but quickly recoils from the goblin's torchlight. A faint smile crosses his face as his strategy is confirmed. Suddenly, more spiders begin to descend from the treetops, and a goblin cries out in warning. In response, Hyunmin swings his torch wildly, forcing a spider to screech and retreat from the flames. With its fangs bared, the spider scuttles away from the threatening fire. This confirms his theory. As cold-blooded creatures, the spiders are indeed afraid of fire. He briefly considers a scorched earth tactic, imagining burning down the whole forest to drive them out. However, he quickly dismisses the idea, realizing that burning the forest would also destroy their only food supply. But then his eyes widen in shock as he realizes his initial assessment was incomplete. He's horrified to see that the spiders are already swarming down from the canopy directly above them. In an instant, he and his goblins are completely surrounded by a horde of giant spiders. As the spiders attack with their webs to ensnare them, our guy nullifies their attack with his torch. The sheer terror of the ambush causes one goblin to drop its weapon and cry out in fear. As chaos erupts, a goblin frantically asks him for orders. Seeing his troops frozen in fear, Hyunmin steels himself, knowing he must be the one to act. He leads by example, charging headfirst into the enemy ranks. He uses his torch to fend off the spider's attack, and for the counterattack he takes aim, preparing to impale a spider with his sharpened stake. With a powerful thrust, he drives his spear clean through the spider's head. Standing victoriously over the slain creature, he proves to his tribe that the enemy can be defeated. His goblins stare in awe, shocked and inspired that their lord single-handedly took down a spider. Raising his torch high, Hyunmin rallies his troops, declaring that as long as they have fire, they can win. "Don't be afraid. Charge," he bellows, igniting the fighting spirit of his goblin army. Following their lord's command, King Prometheus lets out a war cry and rushes into battle. The goblins now work together, using their torches to keep the spiders at a distance. The entire goblin tribe, filled with renewed morale, charges into the fray. Empowered by their lord's example, they fight back, successfully spearing the spiders. One goblin's spear finds its mark, fatally wounding a giant arachnid. King Prometheus, participating in the battle, looks on with determination. He glances back, eager for his lord to see him fighting so bravely. "My lord? You're watching, right?" the little goblin thinks, desperate for his leader's approval. But he is shocked to see that his lord is in danger. Hyunmin is ensnared by the spider's multiple webs. He curses, realizing with dread that the spiders are intelligent enough to coordinate their attacks. Just then, his torch falls from his hands. And now our guy knows that he is totally screwed. The goblins watch in horror as their lord is ensnared in webbing and dragged away. Powerless to help, the tribe can only cry out his name. Wrapped in a thick cocoon, Hyunmin's first thought is for his tribe. What will happen to them? He worries that without him, the territory and its inhabitants will fall back into their old, brutal ways. He then flashes back to their prior suggestion to sacrifice the young as food, a grim fate he fought to prevent. Helplessly bound, he realizes that without his leadership, the entire territory will be in danger once more. King Prometheus watches in tears as his lord is taken, crying out his name in despair. The other goblins try to hold him back, shouting that it's too dangerous to follow. But a spider senses his approach, its multiple eyes locking onto the small goblin. A stream of webbing shoots out, aimed directly at the charging goblin. Dodging the attack, he runs with all his might through the dark and rainy forest. Fueled by a desperate resolve, he thinks to himself, "The lord can't die." With tears in his eyes, his determination to save his lord hardens into a fierce glare. He remembers the moment his lord rescued him from the fire, the day his life changed. And the memory of being named King Prometheus strengthens his resolve. The lord can't die. His heart pounds rapidly as it fills with a new, powerful aura of transformation. A system notification appears as his eyes glow. The effect of his naming has been activated. The protection of flames takes effect, and he is instantly engulfed in a massive blaze. Now a living torch, King Prometheus soars through the air, propelled by his newfound power, and lets out a mighty cry for his lord, becoming a fiery projectile. With a look of pure, fiery determination, he aims himself at his target. He flies through the webs like a comet, a beacon of hope in the darkness, and smashes directly into the cocoon holding Hyunmin. The intense heat from his body instantly incinerates the thick spider webbing. Both he and the cocoon holding Hyunmin fall to the ground. The cocoon and its surrounding webs are completely consumed by the magical flames. Hyunmin, now freed, looks down in astonishment at the source of his rescue. Lying in his arms, the still flaming King Prometheus looks up and stammers, "My lord." Visibly moved, Hyunmin acknowledges his small hero, softly saying his name. After a brief, touching moment, however, he breaks the tension, complaining, "First, could you move a little? You're burning me alive, man." After his evolution, Kim Prometheus meditates to gain control over his new flame powers. He then proudly reports to his lord that he has successfully learned to turn his flames off at will. Hyunmin is surprised but impressed, as the small goblin smugly confirms he can now fully control his powers. Comparing him to a reusable lighter, our guy realizes the incredible strategic potential of naming his subjects. He confirms that Kim Prometheus's flames, while engulfing him, don't cause any harm, making them a safe yet powerful tool. Later, on high alert, he scans the rain-soaked forest, wary of the spider's next move. Stepping deeper into the web-covered territory, he notes that the spiders are still present. Yet, to his surprise, the horde of spiders has not advanced, leading him to wonder if they have run away. But just then, the giant spider let out a hiss while looking toward him. Our guy braces himself for a fight, thinking that the giant spider is going to attack them again. He orders his goblins to prepare for the battle. But the spiders scurry away with surprising speed, abandoning their nest entirely. Utterly bewildered, he can only watch as the formidable foes retreat without a fight. As the last spider vanishes, he finally lets out a heavy sigh of relief and sits down on the ground. The goblins stare in disbelief, realizing that the terrifying battle is truly over. And then the tribe erupts in cheers, celebrating the incredible victory of their lord and Kim Prometheus over the spiders. They shout that the lord drove off the leader spider, and the celebration turns into a full-blown festival. The goblins' worship reaches a new height as they unanimously declare, "The lord is the best." Observing them, Hyunmin can't help but feel that his followers are getting stranger and more fanatical by the minute. Amidst the celebration, he discovers the forest is a source of abundant fruit, which makes him question the rules that said farming was impossible. Suddenly, a goblin scout breaks through the foliage, frantically shouting for the lord. But Hyunmin is lost in a daydream about the global impact he could have with these miraculous fruits, momentarily forgetting his current crisis. He's snapped from his reverie by a group of panicked goblins screaming his name. The lead scout is so terrified he can barely speak, his jaw trembling with fear. He collapses at Hyunmin's feet, struggling to deliver his urgent report. Hyunmin quickly apologizes for being lost in thought and turns his full attention to the matter at hand. Adopting his calm manager persona, he instructs the stuttering goblin to calm down and tell him what happened. The goblin finally gasps out his message. A beast has appeared in their newly conquered territory. The report of a beast, however, piques Hyunmin's curiosity rather than causing alarm. Led by the scout, Hyunmin and his entourage venture past the eerie spider cocoons to investigate the disturbance. Peering into a sliced-open cocoon, the group confirms the scout's report. Curled up inside the webbed sack, they discover a small, sleeping wolf. The scout explains that while everything else in the cocoons was dead, this one cub was miraculously still alive. Praising the goblin for his quick and accurate report, Hyunmin reinforces his corporate value system. He casually mentions this will be noted in the goblin's performance review. However, overcome with starvation, the goblin declares that he can't hold back any longer. With a cry of, "Thanks for the meal," he lunges at the helpless wolf cub with his spear. Hyunmin acts fast, screaming at the psycho goblin to stop his attack. Having successfully intervened, he watches as the wolf cub finally begins to stir. The cub awakens, letting out a soft, sleepy whine. Seeing it's just a pup, Hyunmin calculates that if properly raised, it could become a valuable asset to the territory. At the same time, he soberly considers the alternative. If the pup becomes a threat, they may be forced to kill it. Deciding to take the risk, he cautiously approaches the newly awakened cub. The small wolf stumbles out of the cocoon and makes its way towards him. Suddenly, the cub's demeanor changes as it lets out a ferocious growl. While the goblins watch in terror, the cub lunges forward, seemingly ready to attack their lord. Kim Prometheus screams in panic, fearing the worst for his master. But instead of an attack, Hyunmin finds himself on the receiving end of a very wet, very affectionate puppy lick. Holding up the friendly cub, he introduces it to Kim Prometheus as his new junior, tasking the goblin with its care. Kim Prometheus can only stare in stunned confusion at his new, furry responsibility. A system window then confirms the transaction. Hyunmin has successfully hired an unidentified wolf cub. The wolf cub is officially assigned the position of mascot for the territory. With the spiders gone, the goblins are now free to harvest an enormous bounty of fruit. Looking over their haul, Hyunmin reflects on the successful collection. Thanks to this new food source, he declares that the tribe won't have to worry about hunger for a while. The goblins are overjoyed, collapsing and celebrating amidst piles of the life-saving fruit. Cries of "what a haul" ring through the forest as they revel in their newfound prosperity. Their hero worship escalates to a new level, with some even declaring that their lord is a god, One goblin fanatically corrects another, insisting that the Lord is the true God. Their faith is now absolute. They believe that as long as they follow the Lord, they will never go hungry again. As his tribe celebrates, however, the goblins notice their lord standing apart, quietly observing the forest with a torch in hand. Meanwhile, Kim Prometheus, eager to please, proudly carries a bag full of fruit he picked himself, and excitedly runs to show Hyunmin his contribution, sure that his lord will be happy. The little goblin calls out to his lord, proudly displaying the fruits of his labor. "I picked a whole bunch," he exclaims, expecting praise for his hard work. He then looks up at his lord with stars in his eyes, ready for a pat on the head. However, his smile fades as he gets a closer look at what Hyunmin is doing, dropping a fruit in surprise. Hyunmin turns to greet him, a lit torch in his hand. A terrified Kim Prometheus shivers as his lord ominously declares his timing to be perfect. With a massive pyre prepared behind him, Hyunmin asks his little firestarter for a favor, signaling the start of a massive controlled burn. In a flurry of fire and embers, Hyunmin begins his scorched earth tactic to secure the spider forest. He explains his ruthless but necessary strategy. To eliminate the threat of spiders hiding in the trees, they must burn down part of the forest. His plan is to create a spider-free safe zone for fruit harvesting, complete with watchtowers for early detection and evacuation. But just as he's outlining the plan, he is startled by one of his goblins urgently calling for him. It's Kim Prometheus, who proudly approaches carrying a sack overflowing with the fruits they've gathered. He calmly acknowledges his little firestarter, casually greeting him, "Ah, Kim Pro." With a strategic smile, he praises the goblin's perfect timing before asking him to start the fire. The sack of fruit falls to the ground from the little goblin's hands. He misunderstands the situation and tearfully apologizes, believing their lord is angry. The crying goblin looks on in confusion, while a torch-wielding Hyunmin has no idea why they are begging for forgiveness. Soon, panic ripples through the tribe as they mistakenly conclude their lord is furious, scrambling to offer him fruit as an apology. A baffled Hyunmin tries to explain that it's all a misunderstanding, but the terrified goblins prostrate themselves before him. An elder goblin even goes as far as to offer his own head, pleading with him to spare the children from his perceived wrath. Completely exasperated, Hyunmin finally snaps, yelling at his tribe that it's a huge misunderstanding. As a fruit is comically tossed into the roaring blaze, he desperately pleads for them to just listen for a second. Ultimately, the controlled burn is a success, leaving behind a charred but secure area free from the threat of spiders. Afterward, Hyunmin, followed by Kim Pro and the wolf cub, inspects the newly constructed watchtowers overlooking the chasm. While everyone enjoys the fruits of their labor, Kim Pro fawns over his lord, declaring, "I always believed in you." Hyunmin's deadpan stare prompts a flustered Kim Pro to insist he really, truly believed in him, all while the wolf cub nibbles on his leg. Hyunmin, however, soberly acknowledges that while the watchtowers have stabilized their food supply, their problems are far from over. He mentally calculates the consumption rate of his 260 goblins against their current food source. His conclusion is grim. At their current harvesting rate, they will exhaust all the fruit in this area within just 6 months. And if the fruit's regrowth period is longer than 6 months, the tribe will inevitably face starvation once again. He realizes that to ensure their long-term survival, a fundamental restructuring of their territory is unavoidable. Clenching his fist and crushing a piece of fruit, he resolves to prevent another starvation crisis, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, as Kim Pro tumbles, the mascot wolf cub, still balancing a fruit on its head, playfully nudges him. Later that night, Hyunmin sits by the fire petting the 2 wolf cubs while planning his next move. He sketches a rough map in the dirt, outlining the known surrounding regions, a river, a desert, and another forest, and decides they must prepare for the worst by scouting the river and desert areas mentioned by the goblins he absorbed. He knows, however, that venturing into unknown territory requires meticulous preparation to mitigate the inherent risks. While his small companions doze, he laments the goblin's disadvantage in close combat, wishing for a ranged weapon. Suddenly, he's startled as the sleeping wolf cub stirs on his lap. As the cub moves, he notices a strand of spiderweb stuck to its fur and curiously pulls at it. He's surprised to discover that the web possesses a remarkable amount of elasticity. Stretching the strand further, he realizes its elasticity is far greater than he had initially thought. But then, the tautly stretched web snaps back with surprising force and strikes the wolf cub, rudely awakening it and causing it to yelp in fright. Hyunmin quickly apologizes to the startled cub as it scurries away towards the campfire. The frightened cub then cautiously observes the snapped piece of spiderweb that landed near the flames. There, the discarded strand of web rests on the warm, firelit ground. And as he watches the scene unfold, a spark of an idea begins to form in his mind. Just then, he rushes toward the web and leaves the little goblin sleeping on the ground. He carefully picks up the heat-treated strand from the ground. Examining it, he notices that the heat from the fire has altered its properties, and observes that the once tacky web has now become significantly less sticky. As he holds the web, he ponders the reason for this unexpected change. And then, staring into the flames, a brilliant idea strikes him with the force of a thunderbolt. He then warms the web while holding it in his hand. A triumphant grin spreads across his face as he confirms his hypothesis, just as I thought. He's made a game-changing discovery. Drying spiderwebs near a fire removes their stickiness while perfectly preserving their elasticity. A confused Kim Pro and the wolf cub watch their lord, wondering what he's doing with the strange string. With a confident smirk, Hyunmin holds up the processed spiderweb, commanding his small companions to look closely. Both Kim Pro and the wolf cub look up, utterly perplexed by the object in their lord's hand. He dramatically presents the elastic strand, announcing the beginning of a new project. A few days later, Hyunmin stands ready to address his entire goblin tribe. The full company of goblins, led by Kim Pro and the mascot wolf cub, assembles to hear their lord's announcement. With a calm and confident demeanor, he prepares to announce this new project to his assembled forces. The goblins murmur amongst themselves, utterly clueless as to what a project could possibly be. Hyunmin dramatically throws the cover off a large crate, revealing the fruits of his labor. On cue, Kim Pro and the cub look up expectantly at their lord. Clenching his fist, he announces that this is the new weapon they need for their upcoming project. He reveals the contents of the crate, a massive pile of newly crafted slingshots. The goblins are baffled. One asks if it's food, while another gossips that it was made with something from a spider's butt. As the scandalous rumor spreads, the goblins begin to question their lord's peculiar tastes. Furious at their wild assumptions, Hyunmin yells for quiet, insisting that what he's holding is a weapon. To put an end to the confusion, he calls on his ever-reliable assistant, Kim Pro, for a demonstration. Kim Pro snaps to attention, enthusiastically shouting, "Yes, sir," and readying a fruit. As Kim Pro launches the fruit high into the air, Hyunmin takes his stance, ready to demonstrate the slingshot's power. He pulls back the spider-silk band, taking careful aim at the airborne target. Then, he releases the pouch, sending a small stone flying with incredible speed and precision. The projectile finds its mark, smashing the fruit into pieces in a spectacular mid-air explosion. The goblin tribe can only stare in open-mouthed awe as the debris of the obliterated fruit rains down upon them. Mistaking the feat for sorcery, the goblins erupt in cheers, amazed that their lord used magic to launch a stone. Hyunmin, however, coolly shuts down their speculation with two simple words: "I didn't do it." He proudly displays the new weapon, explaining that the incredible power came from the slingshot itself, and declares that this weapon will give them the ability to fight enemies from a distance, and even those in the air. Now that he has their undivided attention, he prepares to issue his next grand command. Hyunmin announces their next great undertaking, an expedition to find and secure new lands. But the goblins react with fear, worried that exploring new lands means facing another terrifying foe like the spiders. Whispers of fear spread through the ranks as they contemplate the dangers of the unknown. Hyunmin confidently steps forward, ready to quell their fears with a powerful speech. He reminds them of their grim past when hunger forced them to resort to sacrificing their own children to survive. He then challenges them, asking if they still have to worry about such horrors in the present. When a goblin credits him for their salvation, Hyunmin immediately rejects the praise. He firmly corrects them, shifting the credit from himself to the group. "I didn't do it, we did." He calls for volunteers for his expedition, vowing that with their help, no goblin will ever starve again. With fiery passion, he asks who will join him to ensure a safe and prosperous life for them all. In a final, rousing call to action, he asks his tribe, "Who will become the heroes of this territory alongside me?" As the first signs of support ripple through the crowd, Hyunmin is visibly moved, offering his sincere gratitude for their loyalty. In a quiet moment of genuine appreciation, he thanks them for standing with him. And then, in a powerful and unanimous show of support, every single goblin raises their hand, volunteering to join their lord's quest. In a brief flashback, Hyunmin reflects on his past as a top-tier corporate manager, the youngest department head in his company's history. He recalls his unshakable confidence, believing no project had ever been beyond his capabilities. Back in the present, however, as he leads his weary goblin tribe on a massive expedition, he grimly admits that this survival project might be the one to finally break his perfect record. Physically exhausted from the march, he bitterly regrets not going to the gym, only to realize his constant overtime would have made it impossible anyway. The grueling trek soon takes its toll as one of the goblins collapses, crying out that his legs have given out. As the goblin soldier wails that his legs won't move, Hyunmin tries to keep morale up, urging him to hang in there. He then rallies his flagging troops, promising that a place to rest is just a little farther ahead. Noticing his two smallest companions are still full of energy, our guy checks in with Kim Pro and the wolf cub. In stark contrast to the exhausted goblins, Kim Pro and the wolf cub cheerfully announce that they're perfectly fine. He can't help but sweat drop, wryly admitting that the two youngsters are in far better shape than he is. Seeing his lord thinking, Kim Pro looks up with an expression of pure, hopeful expectation. Our guy affectionately calls the wolf cub Guy Bull. The newly named Guy Bull happily trots along with the expedition and even carries a small pack. In a flashback to before their departure, Hyman had attempted to use his naming ability to strengthen his core goblin team. However, his attempts to bestow names like Fluffy and Choco on the bewildered goblins yielded no results. Even naming one goblin Cookie failed to trigger any special effect, much to the creature's confusion. After several failed attempts, he sat surrounded by his confused subjects with nothing to show for his efforts. He puzzles over the situation and mutters to himself that nothing is happening as he expected. That's when he came to a critical realization: simply giving out names isn't enough to trigger the powerful effect of naming. Just then, the wolf cub excitedly howls, prompting Kim Pro to ask if it wants a name too. Kim Pro casually calls the cub Junior, but our guy quickly corrects a confused Kim Pro and explains that it is just a title, not a real name. Promising to explain the corporate concept of a junior later, he confirms that it's not the cub's actual name. Switching gears, Hyunmin crouches down and officially asks the excited wolf cub if it would like a real name. The cub yips enthusiastically, and he agrees that giving it a name should be easy enough. Trying to think of a powerful and fitting name, he attempts to recall the world-devouring wolf from Norse mythology. But as he struggles to remember, muttering, "Fen, fen, fen," the playful cub just rolls onto its back for a belly rub. It lets out a happy "awoo," completely oblivious to the legendary name it is about to receive. Hyunmin can only manage a strained smile, his mind still blanking on the name Fenrir. But just then, he suggests the name Gable. To his shock, a system window appears, declaring that he has successfully bestowed a name upon a territory resident. The system confirms the name as Gaibel, which he accidentally gave to the wolf cub. He panics, screaming that he meant to name him Fenrir, but the system coldly informs him it's too late. Back in the present, resigned to his fate, he apologizes to the newly christened Gable for saddling him with such an unimpressive name. Sensing his lord's distraction, Kim Pro grabs his hand to get his attention. The little goblin looks up and asks how much farther they have to travel. Hyunmin tells him their goal is to reach a river, a word Kim Pro quietly repeats to himself. Having never seen one, a curious Kim Pro asks his lord what a river is. With a knowing smile, he explains that it's a place where a lot of water flows. He then outlines his strategy: where there's water, there are fish, and where there are fish, other beasts will gather. Continuing his line of reasoning, he concludes that if beasts live there, people are likely to live there as well. Kim Pro looks up at the sky, pondering the implications of his lord's words. Hyunmin, however, goes quiet, his thoughts drifting to a far more personal goal. He secretly hopes that if he can find other people, he might discover a clue to finally return to his original world. For a brief moment, a soft, hopeful expression appears on his face at the thought of going home. But his brief respite is shattered when a goblin scout urgently calls out to him. The scouts point frantically into the distance, shouting in terror about a giant beast they've spotted. Hyunmin's eyes lock onto a massive silhouette looming on the horizon, its form obscured by the glaring sun. His blood runs cold as he stares in disbelief, trying to comprehend the monstrous form before them. The beast lets out a guttural growl, its immense teeth bared in a terrifying snarl. As it comes into view, the creature is revealed to be a colossal, demonic bull with glowing red eyes, radiating pure menace. The entire goblin troop, including Kim Pro, trembles in fear, asking their lord what they should do. Hyunmin's eye twitches as his corporate mind rapidly calculates their odds against this overwhelming new threat. With a furious roar, the giant bull digs its hooves into the ground and begins its thunderous charge. The beast then leaps through the air, aiming to flatten the terrified goblin expedition. Knowing it's too late to run, Hyunmin realizes they must stand their ground and respond immediately. Springing into action, he commands the slingshot unit to load up, while the spear unit prepares for a close-quarters engagement. Thinking fast, he grabs a handful of the red, juicy fruit they've been using as rations. He then crushes the fruit against his spear, splattering the red juice all over himself to act as a lure. Now covered in red, he smirks and taunts the beast, asking if it happens to like the color red. The bull's glowing red eyes immediately lock onto him, its rage now completely focused on a single target. Taking the bait, the enraged bull alters its course and charges directly toward Hyunmin. As the monster barrels down on him, he shouts the order for the slingshot unit to aim for its eyes. Trusting their lord's command, the goblins pull back on their spider silk slingshots, ready to fire. At his signal, the entire slingshot unit unleashes a devastating volley of stones at the charging beast. The projectiles rain down, striking the bull's tough hide with brutal force. It bellows in agony as the stones find their mark, peppering its face and body. Hyunmin grins with satisfaction, noting that several projectiles successfully struck the monster's eyes. Though its face is a bloody mess, the bull is far from defeated. Blinded but not broken, the enraged and wounded beast continues its unstoppable charge. Hyunmin curses, shocked that even blinding the monster wasn't enough to stop it. With no other option, he screams for the spear unit to brace for impact and launch a frontal assault. The goblin spearmen bravely charge forward to meet the rampaging bull head-on, but the front line is instantly annihilated as the bull crashes through their formation, impaling goblins on its horns. Hyunmin watches in horror as his soldiers are thrown aside like dolls, their sacrifice failing to halt the beast's momentum. As the dust settles, the heavily wounded bull stands amidst the carnage, a strange blue light beginning to emanate from its body.